Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Beth Wanger. Welcome back to Thoughts and Feelings. It's been a few weeks, and I am thrilled to be a little bit, quote, back to normal after the holidays. Now, if you remember from my last post, The Christmas Complex, I alluded to the fact that this time of year can be kind of a lot mentally, emotionally, physically, time-wise, financially, can be pretty brutal. So, that leads us really nicely, if you felt any of those things, that leads us nicely into our next topic, which is today's topic, stress. So I've titled today, Stress is the Secret Ingredient. It's a little bit of a clickbaity name. I hope you can forgive me though, because I really do feel like it's true. If we can understand a little bit more about how stress works in our bodies, instead of feeling like we have to fight it, or it's always a problem, or stress is killing us, um, it can help us to really be more successful in, quote, managing our stress, but also in doing what we want to do. So let's talk a little bit more about this. But before we begin, just a reminder, this is an informational, educational, entertaining, whatever you want to call it, blog or podcast, but it is not a substitute for qualified mental health or medical support. If you're in distress, I really want to encourage you to reach out to somebody who can offer you qualified support. Okay, on to the topic. If you only get one part of today, then I hope this next sentence really resonates for you. And that is that stress is not inherently bad. In fact, all stress is both good stress and bad stress. We need stress to grow. That's how our bones get stronger. It's how our muscles get bigger. It's how astronauts train. It's how we learn to read and write and have motor skills. Stress is really a necessary part of life. Now, the guy who coined the term stress actually initially spoke about it negatively and came to recant that later, regretted that people took it on in such a negative way because stress is not inherently bad. So, in a 2012 University of Wisconsin study, and I'm going to link the study below, they studied millions of subjects and found that those who had more stress in their lives, yes, they had a 43% greater chance of mortality, but only if they believed that stress was negative. In other words, the subjects who had the same amount of stress, but didn't think that the stress was bad for them, they did not have that higher mortality rate. It is the belief that stress is bad rather than stress itself that is so bad for us, so to speak. Take a minute and let that sink in. If you're under stress, that doesn't necessarily mean that stress is going to kill you, no matter what headlines you read. If we think that stress is bad for us, it is. If we don't, then it's not necessarily so. One of the reasons that we may that kind of feel this way, or we might think, oh my God, stress is so bad, is because it comes with a certain feeling in the body that we may have associated with unpleasant things. Stress might feel a little bit like danger. We get an elevated heart rate, body temperature comes up, and stress hormones are released, adrenaline and cortisol. And you can feel that in your body. We start to sort of speed up. However, if we reframe this to think about it rather than thinking about it as a stress response, but as a challenge response, so we are sort of, our bodies are responding to whatever the situation is that we have, then we can see it as a positive thing. Those stress hormones are what help us to focus and to move more quickly. We also get oxytocin, which is helps us to connect better with others, really important for survival. And that one feels kind of nice. So the stress hormones themselves aren't necessarily bad. We don't want them in our systems forever, but that's another story. Stress itself is not inherently bad. So if we can take this idea that stress is bad and decouple it from the actual experience of stress itself, it's just this neutral thing that happens. Now, this concept and all this part here come from the work of Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and I'm going to share her book and her TED Talk also in the notes below because it is incredibly impactful. Her work shows that if we can just educate people that stress is not deadly, stress is not inherently bad, it will improve their experience of stress. They're less likely to experience the negative effects of stress. So important for me to feel like I'm sharing this with you, and I hope you can pass it on to others. Now, I'm not like trying to silver lining as a verb. I'm not trying to silver lining away. You know, crappy things happen and life is hard and none of that is great. So please don't read this as like, if you are experiencing many adverse experiences, you should be happy because stress. And that's not true at all. I'm simply trying to say that stress itself as is just part of the human experience. But not all human systems are created equal. So not all humans have the same systems. Each of us is going to respond differently to stress. I will tell you that I find things stressful that some of you will not. Um, Certainly, I find things stressful that my partner does not, which is great because we can support each other in that way. It's all a factor of our history, our disposition, but also our physical experience in our body. If my immune system is compromised, if I live with a disability, if I have a family with intergenerational trauma, maybe if I have a lower socioeconomic status or a non privileged identity, which I largely do not, or a complex trauma history, then I am more likely to experience stress in a different way than somebody who does not have those experiences. So it's really important to remember that. Um, One really simple example is that I am an introvert and I have friends who are extroverts. And my extroverted friends can spend time with others and feel recharged, rejuvenated. Afterward, I feel the exact opposite. I feel quite tired. I feel depleted. I need a vacation after my vacation because of the stress that my vacation caused. That's just how my system is. And this isn't like a failure on anyone's part or like, oh, I don't manage my stress well. Um, I meditate, I exercise, I'm educated, I do all the friggin' things. And stress will still have this, this effect on me. So for some of us, we may experience stress more acutely, um, maybe as hypervigilance. Some of us will experience the effects of stress for longer in our bodies. These things are all true. And I say all this to say that this isn't something like, it's not like an apples to apples situation. I think this is really important because if we think about, again, a simple example, if we're trying to follow a workout plan and the trainer, who is somebody who works out for a living, quite likely has good genes that predispose them to looking a certain way, having low body fat, able to build muscle, maybe low stress in their lives. And they don't have another job on top of their working out job. Sometimes what they suggest for programming may not work for the people they're programming for. This isn't always true, okay? I don't want to malign trainers as a profession, but many times if I try to follow programming that someone else has given me, I need to account for the fact that my life is already quite active. And I'm not somebody who sits all day for a living and then is just working out for an hour. Or we may find that that person, that trainer, is able to recover much more quickly from the stress of their life than the average person. So we're going to talk more about that in a moment, but this is where the not all systems are equal is important to keep in mind. Certainly, age might be a factor. Your hormonal makeup might be a factor. Just lots of things to keep in mind. And none of it means that you are bad or a problem, just that we are different. People who are highly sensitive, gosh, I think of myself as somebody who is quite empathic, very porous when it comes to other people's emotions, and I can be very strongly affected by those. And that causes a certain amount of stress to me. So I will have to account for that in whatever I do for the rest of the day. It's just part of how my life is, part of how my body is. Now, if we can understand how we respond to stress, so if anything I said so far kind of resonated, you're like, yeah, that sounds like me. Just understanding that can be incredibly helpful. So just because the trainer says that day two, you should be able to do this, that doesn't mean that that is reasonable or right for you. They don't know you. And or maybe they do, but if you're just following a pre-recorded thing, they don't know you. And sometimes, even if they do, they may not be aware of what it's like to be in your body. Stress of all kinds, positive stress, negative stress, is still stress. So, what I mean by that is that maybe last weekend you had family in town, or you had a great birthday party to go to. You absolutely loved it. You had the time of your life, but that was still stress on your body. If you had a fight with your kids or your partner, if you had a drink last night, if you didn't have enough sleep, if you're feeling a lot of grief, if you are quite concerned about the state of the world, all of these things are going to affect your body. If you have never, if that sounds like absolute bunk to you, please know that this is actually a measurable phenomenon and you can measure it yourself. We're going to talk about that next. I want you to know all of this. If this is news to you, I want you to know all of this because one of the most common mistakes I see is people feeling like they should just be able to do whatever they want to do in the gym, no matter what else is going on in their lives. And it just doesn't work that way. If you have a lot of stress at work, it's going to affect, it does take a toll on your mind and your body. Stress is stress. So adding more stress at the gym, we just need to think about what we're doing and how much we're able to do. That doesn't mean you don't train. It doesn't mean you don't move. It means we need to just take that into account. Rest is really important as well, and any good program builds rest in. But more importantly, is how am I responding to the stressors in my life? And I say that with there's no shame, there's no guilt to how you're responding. So much of that is completely out of your control. You're not a bad person if you're not managing your stress. I don't even know how one manages stress, but perhaps understanding it is a start. So, what does this look like in the real world? I'll give you my personal real life example. I Last week I was on vacation, which you'd think would be wow, Laurie, that should be relaxing. You should be like ready to go this week. But I had family visiting and staying with me from out of town. I had much more stimulation than I typically have, and really from like dawn to dusk, which I normally would not have. This takes quite a while. I enjoyed my time. We did some fun things. It takes a lot out of me. I also did much more driving than I normally do. And I find driving incredibly stressful. So, all of these things mean that I'm a little more fatigued. Um, I'm a little more tired. In general, I just feel a little bit worn out. I know that I'm not making any like PRs in the gym tomorrow when I feel that way. So I had to go back to, I had to, I got to go back to work on Monday and I had a full day Monday, I had a full day Tuesday, and today's a little bit slower. But when I woke up this morning, I was not rested enough to really go hard the way that I wanted to. So I knew that I needed to do a little bit less in my movement practice today. Now, you may be thinking, I have no idea what my body feels like. Or you may be somebody who has a history of overtraining, like working out too much and then getting hurt or getting sick. Or you just may be like, I have no freaking clue what you're talking about. So the good news is that for those of us who are not as well connected with our own systems, we do have external tools to help us with that. One of the tools we have available to us that can help us to sort of gauge where we are in terms of our overall stress and recovery is heart rate variability. Now, heart rate variability refers to the amount of time between your heartbeats. These fluctuations, you can't detect them on your own, but they can be measured, and I'll give you some ideas in a moment of how you might do that. A lower heart rate variability is generally associated with higher stress or poorer adaptation. A higher heart rate variability generally is more desirable. Now, there are always going to be fluctuations and lots of reasons why things might be one or another, but on the whole, if your heart rate variability is higher, you are in better shape to go ahead and do whatever you were going to do, stress-wise. We can measure our heart rate variability by using our phones. There's a really simple free app called HRV for training. Takes a minute and you use the camera on the back of your phone to test that. If you have an iPhone and an Apple Watch, it also takes random measurements of your HRV all day and all night. So you do get an average over time, but it's not generally as accurate. So I don't really recommend that. The Morpheus, what a name. So the Morpheus training system is a heart rate monitor, and you can use it to track your heart rate variability daily. I really actually like the Morpheus. Of course, it does cost some money, but it's not unreasonable. It's like hundred and something dollars, under 200. You can use it to track your heart rate variability daily, but it also gives you a measurement coupled with your heart rate, your hours slept, and your reported how are you feeling to tell you where it thinks you are in terms of recovery. So interestingly, yesterday I didn't really do any training. I did a really light 30-minute yoga session and I like walked 10 minutes with the dogs and then I was a little bit active with my clients. Other than that, I was just living with the sort of after effects of having had visitors over the holidays. And I did have a somewhat stressful visit to the doctor yesterday. I'll just tell you, I waited for an hour at this doctor, new doctor. And when they took me back, they said, "Oh, didn't we tell you we don't take your insurance?" So I was pretty mad. Anyway, that was stressful. All of that meant that this morning when I woke up, my heart rate variability, not so great. And I could feel that my body just it did not feel good. And I know in my body what that feels like. And of course, you're going to have a different experience. So I knew that when I went to do my training, I was going to do an intervals rowing class. I knew that I just would not be able to push it as hard as I wanted to. And there is part of me that's always a little frustrated with this. Like, man, I didn't want to use my energy on the doctor visit yesterday. So it's okay to be a little bit frustrated about stress. I think that's a normal response, sure. It would certainly be worse if we pretended we weren't irritated about it because it'll come out some other way. But the reality is that we can only work with the body that we have. If I had gotten on the rower today and just tried to push as though I were at my 100% sort of lowest stress situation, then tomorrow I would feel worse. The fastest road to getting better at managing our stress or working with our stress is acknowledging the stress that we're already under and not trying to push when we really can't. So even though the stress that I experienced yesterday, some of it wasn't desirable stress. It wasn't like I trained and I really enjoyed it. I did a really hard workout. Oh, that felt great. And I knew I was going to be tired tomorrow. No, it was just like crappy life. But that's how it is. Acknowledging that, moving through it. I know that after today was overall a lower stress day. I did not push myself overly hard in that training session, provided that I sleep well tonight and nothing else like absolutely wacky happens. Tomorrow I'll be ready to train a little bit harder again. So again, I already had a sense of how I was feeling. And the heart rate variability, in this case, the Morpheus helped me to understand that, yeah, I really am a little bit under where I want to be stress wise. And so it's better for me not to push too hard. Understanding our stress is really what can help us to work more skillfully with it. If I were to deny my experience, that's not at all helpful. As I said, I would end up being overtraining, getting more tired. We see this in folks sometimes who are at the gym every day, every day, every day, never want to take a rest day, or who just started a new training program and really feel like the only way is to do it every single day. There is certainly something to be said for consistency. However, if we're not taking our proper rest and allowing our systems to recover properly, then we're just not going to be able to sustain it. It's like anything else that we do. And I think this is really a missing piece for a lot of folks when they take on a new endeavor. Um, just not understanding that our life stress really isn't separate from the other types of stress our body is experiencing. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm sure that for some of us, this is going to bring up some questions. If you have anything you want to ask, please feel free to leave it in the chat. Or if you'd like to share your experience around stress, um, heart rate variability, or anything else, just go ahead and leave me a comment. I really appreciate your listening. I'm happy to be with you here again this year, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and feelings on the topic. I'll see you soon.